Okay, so it's tolerance, affirmation, celebration, participation. Before we get all the way to participation, we should say no. Now, you know what? I'm not even going to tolerate this.
I'm pretty sure we've all heard the popular slogan floating around today that we must tolerate what others do, even when what they're doing is clearly wrong or downright evil. And sadly, even many Christians in the West have come to treat this idea as a virtue and go along with it. But here is the question. Is tolerance really a Christian virtue? Let's hear what Matt Walsh has to say about this.
We don't need to laud people who demonstrate tolerance. It takes no courage or even any effort to tolerate things. Tolerating a tolerable thing makes sense. It's logical. It's not a heroic act. It's not an act at all. You can tolerate while doing nothing. You can tolerate while sitting on your couch. You can lounge in your living room eating Doritos while congratulating yourself for all the tolerating you're doing. Hey, everyone, look at me. I'm being tolerant. You can declare as the crumbs fall on your shirt. That's why I never said, as has been claimed by my critics, that tolerance is bad or has no place in society or whatever. Tolerance is the default state of all people. Tolerance is the lowest effort thing you can do because you aren't doing anything. Which, again, when you're tolerating tolerable things, fine. I'm not saying you shouldn't. I'm just saying, I'm not going to give you credit for that. I'm being tolerant. Okay, good for you. What, so you're doing nothing? You're just doing nothing and allowing someone to do something. Cool. Good for you. It's not the kind of thing we need to, we don't need pastors up on the pulpit preaching, well, this is why we should be tolerant. Which pastors do preach about that all the time. And a lot of people love to hear it because it requires nothing of you. That's the great thing about tolerance as a virtue. I don't have to do anything. It requires absolutely nothing. Which is why it's not a virtue. Intolerance is a virtue, though, because it is active. It is a thing you do. All virtues are things you do. If a virtue requires you to do nothing, it is not a virtue. If you're saying to yourself, wow, I really like this virtue because I don't have to do anything. This is a really easy virtue to have. Well, hate to break it to you, that means it's not a virtue. Intolerance requires you to get up and do something or speak out or at least stop chomping on the Doritos for a second. Intolerance is noble and brave, provided, of course, that it's directed at something actually bad. Yeah, that's the one qualifier. Intolerance is only virtuous if it's directed at evil. Obviously, being intolerant to good things is not virtuous. I would think that such a stipulation is so obvious that it doesn't need to be said out loud. Intolerance to, something benign, right, makes you a jerk. Or if you've got a whole bunch of pet peeves, this is why we say pet peeves are that's the reason we call it your pet peeve. It's just something that annoys you but isn't really bad necessarily, but that's why it's a pet peeve. It's a pet, it's yours. And so being intolerant of people who are doing something that's a pet peeve of yours, that makes you a jerk, right? Intolerance to something good and virtuous makes you a leftist. But intolerance to what is truly evil and wrong makes you a good person. It is a loving and good act. And we have not had nearly enough intolerance in our society.
Now, there are two key points Matt Walsh makes here, and both are worth unpacking. First, he explains that tolerance isn't really an action at all. It's a default state. It doesn't require any effort or conviction from you. In simple terms, tolerance is what happens when you do nothing. Think about it this way. Imagine someone walks into your house and starts cursing and swearing in front of your children. Imagine someone walks into your house and starts cursing and swearing in front of your children. If you tolerate that, you're not being noble or open-minded. You're simply staying silent. You're letting it happen. You might tell yourself that you're being polite, non-judgmental, or keeping the peace. But in reality, you're allowing something harmful to unfold right before your eyes. Your children are hearing those words, your home's values are being compromised, and your silence becomes a quiet form of consent. That's what tolerance looks like. Passive, effortless, and often mistaken for virtue. Second, Matt points out that intolerance of evil is the exact opposite. It's an action, something that requires courage and conviction. Going back to the same example, if that person keeps cursing, you step in. You say, hey, please don't use that language in front of my kids. And if they continue, you take the next step. You ask them to leave. That's not being rude, that's being responsible. Now you see the contrast? In the first situation, you're passively allowing evil to exist in your space. In the second, you're actively confronting it. You're drawing a boundary, you're standing up for what is right and saying, not in my house. And that's Matt's core point. Tolerance takes no courage, but intolerance of evil does, which means tolerance by itself cannot be a Christian virtue, because virtue always involves intentional action, the courage to choose the good even when it's uncomfortable. Now, let's take the idea further and hear what Bishop Barron has to say about this.
I would say in a lot of Western societies today, the fundamental values have become diversity, tolerance, and inclusivity. I guess especially for a lot of younger people, if you were to say, well, how come those are good? How come it's good to be inclusive, and tolerant of diversity? People would say, well, duh, that's just good to be that way, They're seen as the fundamental values. Well, can I make a contrast between that and the community of the church, the community of Jesus Christ? Because we would say the fundamental value is not freedom or equality or inclusivity or diversity or tolerance. We would say the fundamental value in the community of Jesus Christ is love. Now, as I've said a million times, to love is to will the good of the other, right? We would say as Christians, that's the value that's most bedrock and that in turn conditions all the other values. Now, here's where things get maybe a little bit confusing, because sometimes love indeed is tolerant. Sometimes love is indeed inclusive. Sometimes it is very open to diversity, but not always. See, and thereupon hangs a tale, and I think that distinction is worth getting at. So, when would love include these things? Well, love, to will the good of the other, of course, is tolerant, because it reaches out to the person, no matter what that person's belief. It still says, I want to establish a contact with you as a dignified human being. Is love inclusive? Well, sure, because its purpose ultimately is to draw people into itself. Is it tolerant of diversity? Yeah, often, because love is opposed to an imperialistic, imposition of one point of view. So there is a lot of overlap, but not always. The Church of Jesus Christ, I would argue, both includes and excludes. The inclusion should be obvious. Think of the Bernini colonnade, right, outside of St. Peter's, that reaches out like two great arms to include everybody. So the purpose of the church is to preach to all nations, right? To go to the ends of the world, to gather everybody unto Christ. Of course, the church has an inclusive stance. But does the church, by the same token, exclude? And the answer is, frankly, yes. Now, what do I mean? The church from the beginning has recognized that certain forms of behavior, certain styles of life are so repugnant to what the church is about that it, by its very nature, excludes them. We say, for example, that someone in the state of mortal sin, not having been to a confession, is excluded from receiving communion. In extreme cases, the church will excommunicate someone. Not out of viciousness, and that's my whole point, but out of a form, if you want, of tough love, of willing the good of the other, right? It includes, yes, indeed, but at times, also out of love, it excludes. I know it's a subtle thing, and I know it's very easy to be drawn into the rhetoric of the present day and say, well, of course, diversity, tolerance, inclusion, that's the ultimate value. No, those are derivative values that are less fundamental than the value of love. Let me close with a line from Cardinal George some years ago. He was commenting on the song, which has been very popular, at least in Catholic circles, the last maybe 20 years. It's a song that's very singable. People like it, and it's got the lines, all are welcome in this place. So as the Mass begins, we sing that everyone is included. True? Yeah. The church does, in love, reach out to include the whole world. Saints and sinners? Yeah. Last time I checked, every single person that comes in that place is a sinner, right? But Cardinal George's comment was, his little gloss on that song was, yeah, all are welcome in this place, but on Christ's terms, not your own. In other words, you don't come to church and say, hey, here I am, just as I am, living just as I live, and you're obliged to welcome me in every sense. No, I welcome you as someone that's been invited by Christ, but I welcome you on Christ's terms. Love is more fundamental than inclusion, tolerance, and diversity.
As Bishop Barron rightly points out, tolerance is not a Christian virtue, love is. And love in the Christian sense isn't just a warm sentiment or blind acceptance. It is, as St. Thomas Aquinas defined it, willing the good of the other. That means our goal as Christians isn't to simply put up with people or their behavior, but to genuinely seek their good, even if that sometimes requires correction or confrontation. So yes, there are times when tolerance can be part of love. For instance, when someone makes an honest mistake or holds an ignorant view, we may patiently tolerate it out of compassion. But that tolerance becomes a virtue only when it's exercised under the umbrella of love, when it's aimed at the person's ultimate good, not at preserving our own comfort or reputation. And this is precisely why throughout history, the church has drawn boundaries and excluded certain behaviors, not because she's an authoritarian or judgmental, but because she loves her children enough to protect them from spiritual harm. Just like a parent would forbid their children from playing on a busy road, the church warns and disciplines out of concern for souls. If you want a powerful biblical example, look at Jesus cleansing the temple in John chapter 2. Many today would accuse him of being intolerant. After all, he overturned tables, drew out the money changers, and confronted hypocrisy head-on. Yet that moment wasn't about anger or hatred. It was love in action. Jesus could not stand by and tolerate the desecration of his Father's house. His intolerance of evil flowed directly from his perfect love for his Father and love for the people being misled. And that is the key distinction. True Christian love is not passive tolerance. It is the courage to will the good of the others, even when that means standing against their sin. Because love that refuses to confront evil isn't really love. It's indifference dressed up as virtue. Finally, I would like to end with the saying of Archbishop Fulton J. Sheen. He observed, "It is said America is suffering from intolerance. It is not. It is suffering from tolerance. Tolerance of right and wrong, tolerance of truth and error, tolerance of virtue and evil, tolerance of Christ and chaos." I hope this video is helpful. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section. God bless you.